Hello everyone and welcome to the Tricentis webinar series. We are so happy to have you here with us today. My name is Chelsea and I am your webinar host for today. Now today's webinar is on the topic of continuous testing with TOSCA Test Suite. We are pleased to have Thomas Strucker, the product owner of the automation platform at Tricentis, here with us to share from his experiences in continuous testing and integration. Before we launch into the webinar, I would like to invite our guests to please feel free to submit any questions you have for a question and answer session after the presentation. Please note as well that all attendees will be muted, so to submit a question, simply type it into the question panel on the GoToWebinar interface. We love your participation and we look forward to answering those questions at the end of the webinar. Now, before I hand everything over to Thomas, I would like to mention that we also have a short exit survey at the end of the webinar. So thank you in advance for your participation and feedback on how we can improve our webinar series. So now, without any further delay, may I present our speaker. Welcome, Thomas.
Hi, Chelsea. Thanks for the invitation. Hello, everybody. So today's topic is continuous integration in general and TOSCA continuous integration specifically. So to start, almost any customer I've talked to recently is facing the same challenge, which is basically the adaptation and implementation of modern software development methods within their companies. We are talking about shifting from waterfall to some kind of agile development. The well-known keywords here are Scrum and recently DevOps. We probably all have at least an idea of what the concept behind these methodologies is, so I just want to give you a quick overview on the topic and our thoughts about it. All right. DevOps, what is it about? Basically, we have this infinite loop which describes the process from planning a project over development, build, test, release, deployment phase, which is going on and on. So what is key here is the collaboration. A collaboration between development and operations. They are no longer standalone silos, but rather one organism with short feedback lifecycle. So actually, this is the state of the art in most companies, I guess. Tricentis also did the transition from waterfall to agile, and I can tell you that it was quite some effort to review existing mindsets, but finally we succeeded and are now enjoying the results. So this is the situation today. The question now is, what has to be expected here in the near future? Well, we think testing in general will not change that much. There will be unit tests, there will be automated tests, and of course there will be some manual tests as well. What we think that will dramatically change is the pace. So you may have heard phrases like Amazon deploys every 11 somewhat seconds, which is probably not exactly at odds with the truth, but nevertheless we already experience today the challenge of increased pace. And this evolution is specifically significant for testing due to the fact that it generates huge pressure on testing. You have to keep pace with development, you have to keep your test artifacts updated, you have to reduce execution time, and so on. TOSCA already addresses these challenges and always tries to improve here, of course. So what is the answer to this request in increased speed? Well, automation is definitely one answer. To be exact, it is mandatory to succeed, but it's not the only one. The other one is known as a buzzword called continuous testing. There are a lot of definitions for this. Basically, we see here two major bullet points. The first one is enable agile testing, which means to integrate the testing process into an agile development workflow. And the second is to integrate the agile testing in whole into your delivery pipeline. And this is where TOSCA and specifically TOSCA CI kicks in. With TOSCA CI, we provide a possibility to seamlessly integrate TOSCA into your existing continuous integration tool environment. You can trigger test execution directly from your build tool. And what I wanted to mention at that point is that the TOSCA CI is a great example for the success of our internal shift to agile development, as it was created out of specific customer requests in form of a collaborative development together with some friendly customers. And since then, we continuously tried to improve here with providing new features. And these were all inspired by you with your continuous feedback. So coming to TOSCA CI and its key features. Well, first of all, you can reuse existing TOSCA artifacts and test environments. We think this is a huge advantage. So you don't have to start from scratch, but you can use existing execution machines, existing repositories, and so on. What's more, you can run TOSCA tests either directly on your build server, such as running the unit tests so far within your build process, or you can distribute the test execution in one or as well several test clients, which gives you additional speed. What's more, we can configure the test execution based on execution type. We will come to this later on, just to give you an idea. Let's assume you've got your daily builds for each check-in. Well, you won't run the whole regression for that. So it makes sense to have a subset for this, which is not the whole regression, but just an important part, kind of smoke tests. Overnight, on the other hand, you will try to run the whole regression to build your setup. So you can switch between, you have switches to choose which kind of execution you want to execute for each build. And receive test results on build server in your desired format. What does it mean? We execute TOSCA artifacts and produce, therefore, execution results directly in TOSCA. What's more, we feed back the results to your build server in any form you want. Basically, out of the box, we provide a TOSCA-specific format or the well-known JUnit format. So almost any build server can read JUnit and display it in a nicely humanly readingly form. And last but not least, you can customize the whole TOSCA CI solution to fit your specific needs, which means you can customize the collecting of items, you can customize your result, you can customize the execution process as well. We've got customers that added here, for example, sending a TOSCA report by mail to a specific department and so on. So there's really a broad range of possibilities. All right. Now, I just want to give you a quick overview over the architecture of our solution. The figure here shows you the architecture of a local execution, which means you've got your build server with your build tool, and directly on your build server you are executing the TOSCA tests. The build tool triggers the client, which uses the execution and an existing workspace to run the tests on your test object and feeds back the result to your build tool. That's one approach, the local execution, but probably not the most used. We experienced that customers often require a distributed execution because they don't have their test environment directly on their build server. So therefore, we provide the possibility to distribute your execution through one or several clients. How does it work? Well, again, you've got your build tool on your build server and a TOSCA client, which gets the request for test execution. The client calls the TOSCA remote execution service on one or n agents and hands over the items that should be executed. The remote execution service uses TOSCA CI execution and an existing workspace, runs the test, and feeds back the result. All right, so that's about the architecture. Now I just want to directly jump into the live demo. All right, what has to be done to set it up? First of all, I previously mentioned you can reuse your existing test environment, which means as you're using TOSCA, you probably already have execution machines, if they are VMs or physical machine, doesn't matter. where you've got set up TOSCA, set up a workspace, working on a specific common repository. And what we are doing, we're just reusing it. So first thing is you would set up your agent. So you go to your agent machine, switch to the TOSCA CI directory, which is basically situated within Tricentis Home, TOSCA Test Suite, TOSCA Commander, TOSCA CI. There you've got several components, the one for the server, and within there's another package called client. This is the one we copy onto our build server. We will come to that later on. So to configure your agent, we need the TOSCA Remote Execution Service executable. This is a standalone executable that hosts a WCF service, which is waiting for requests from the build server. Before we started, we set up our workspace to be able to execute TOSCA CI tests. So what we are doing here is we are switching to our workspace directory, open up our workspace. This is not a specific one, it's just the standard workspace you're already using on your execution machine. All right, let's log in. There we are. So we have to provide information about which artifacts to use for TOSCA continuous integration. So the first thing we do is we go to the project section, check out the project root, and flag a folder where we should build our execution results for TOSCA CI. That's done by first creating a property within the property definition for folders. Name of the property is called Continuous Integration Build Root Folder. It makes sense to have the default value false and have a value range for true and false. That makes it quite easy to handle it afterwards. If we've done that, we can switch over to the execution section, find or create the desired build folder, and set the flag to true. All right. So now we've flagged our build folder to be the folder to hold the execution results for our CI. Next step is we have to flag the items we want to execute. How is that done? Well, it's the same approach. We go to the properties definition and add a flag property to execution lists. This one is called continuous integration. Again, should have the default value false and the value range true and false. And if we've done that, we go back to our items we want to execute. In my case, I've got here 3 existing execution lists, as you may have as well. And I just switch to the properties view and set the continuous integration flag to true. All right. Having done that means we are done in TOSCA. The repository, especially this workspace, is capable to execute TOSCA CI test. Don't forget to check in all. We can close our workspace. The last step to do is start the TOSCA CI execution service and probably configure it up front. We'll come to that later on. I just start it for now. All right, so I double click. All right, it's already started. My bad, sorry for that. I double click the executable, and within the shell window, we can see the remote service is running. It's running on a specific IP. This IP will be used afterwards from the build server to communicate with this execution service. So that's it basically for the server. Now switch on to our build tool. In my case, I've installed locally a Jenkins environment, Jenkins instance. To inform you up front, you can use any build tool you desire, because the only relevant feature that has to be present is the build tool has to be capable of executing a command file or starting an executable with param. So that's mandatory for each build tool. In my case, I'm using Jenkins as mentioned. So what do we do here? Let's assume we've got an existing project with already some build steps that build our software, do probably some packaging, do probably some copying within the file system and whatsoever. To make it possible to execute TOSCA CI tests, we just add another build step. In Jenkins, it's kind of batch command build step, so a build step that executes a Windows batch command. And how does it look like? Well, in general, the only thing we do is we are calling the TOSCA CI client executable and give it some params. So which params do we need? The first one is the -m param. That's a mandatory param, which is meant to be the mode. Here you've got the possibility to use local for a local execution directly on the build server, or distributed to distribute the execution onto execution machines. The next one I am using here is -t, which represents the result type. In my case, I use JUnit, which means we get back from TOSCA CI a well-formatted JUnit result. And the last one is -r, which is meant to give you information about where to store the result from. So here we store it in a location where Jenkins can read it, which is basically the workspace directory of Jenkins. All right, that's our build step. At the end, we add a post-build action. In this case, it's a publish JUnit test result report, because that's exactly what we want to do. And we hand over the result XML we get back from TOSCA. So that's it basically. We've set it up. What's next is we can try to build, start the build and see what happens. And to show you what happens, I'll just open the console here, and what's more, I open up the remote execution service to see what happens there. So the request already arrived at the remote machine, and it already is executing tests. By the way, what we're using here is the TOSCA API to work with the local workspace and execute the test cases. All right, test result has been created, saving workspace, workspace has been saved, and result is an XML document is now created and will be sent back to the build server. That's it, the execution has been finished. As you can see in Jenkins, our build step now is finished with the state unstable. Well, that's a specific state for Jenkins, I guess. Unstable means the following. Let's have a look at the test results. We go back to the project and have a look at the latest test result. So we now executed TOSCA tests, and as you can see, we executed quite some tests, but one failed. This is already the JUnit test result we provided to Jenkins, and Jenkins shows it into a pretty format. Here we can see there is a execution item which is called failed, and this certainly failed. If we click on it, we now get an exact message for what went wrong here. You can see this one was passed, the next one was failed. Here we used a tbox set buffer, and failed was the following. We did a verification and verified expected value foo, but the actual value was bar. So we get a detailed view on what really went wrong, which gives you an idea why your build failed. All right. So this was the first possibility to execute TOSCA CI. As you can see, the steps to set up were not that difficult. Just a few steps on the agent and just a bit of configuration on your build server. So what is TOSCA CI capable to do for you as well? Well, I've prepared some other projects to demonstrate you that. Initially, previously I already said or mentioned we can switch on execution types and say, please execute just items with a specific execution type for this build. I gave you the example for daily builds and the nightly build, which produces setup and probably runs the whole regression. So I prepared another project here. We switched to the configuration. And what is the difference here? Well, we again call the TOSCA CI client exe with the m parameter distributed, with the t parameter JUnit. But what's next is the -c. This parameter gives you the possibility to hand over a test configuration XML to TOSCA CI. This XML can hold several different parameters that parameterize the execution for you. So let's have a look what this config file has in it. All right, there we go. It's a simple XML structure, and as you can see, the important point here is execution types. We added a parameter with the execution type smoke with the intention, hey, TOSCA CI, please execute only items that match this execution type. That's the idea, all right? So by handing over this configuration file, we expect that not all items are executed in TOSCA, but just items that match this execution type. To make this happen, we switch back to TOSCA, open up the workspace, log in into the workspace and set the mandatory parameter for this. All right, there we go. Once again, like we did beforehand, we switch to the project section and there to the properties definition. And what we have to do is, again, as before, we add a flag to execution lists. In this case, it's called execution type. It makes sense to give it no default value and to add a value range for your specific kinds of execution types. You can, it's free text, so you can define whatever you want to. I just, as an example, defined here regression and smoke. So on all my execution lists, I can now decide if I want to set an execution type. In this case, I used the end-to-end test execution list and set the execution type smoke test. So to give you an idea, the example here is now a daily build for each check-in, and I just want to execute smoke tests. All right. So we've set up the execution type property, check-in all, close our workspace, and are ready to go. So we start, hand over our config file to the TOSCA CI client, which then deserializes this XML file and sends it to the TOSCA CI execution service. You can see we are already on executing tests, which means the TOSCA API opens up the workspace, searches for the items, executes the items, and stores the results in a test mandate within our build folder. All right, there we go. Execution finished, result was written. It came back to Jenkins, and we finished with a success. So our smoke test went well. Let's have a look at the result, latest test result. This is our JUnit result. We executed several execution lists, execution entries within our execution list, and they all went past. So that was execution types. What else is possible with our config XML? Well, we go back to the project dashboard. I've prepared some more. One of them is TOSCA CI with surrogate IDs. As you may know, every item in TOSCA has a specific unique ID. So rather than using the execution type, you could also use a specific unique ID to execute. The call here is exactly the same. We hand over a config file. In this case, I called it surrogate test config file. Let's have a look into that. The only difference is here we're using surrogate IDs. Here we're using just one. Of course, we can use several if we want to. That's up to you. All right, let's once again switch into our TOSCA workspace and have a look at the results. We didn't check that so far. Of course, we checked the results within Jenkins, which looks fine. But was it really executed in TOSCA, and do we really have the results? Well, let's see. Let's log in again. And switch into the execution section. And as you can see, there is something in our build root folder. For each build we triggered from Jenkins, we get an extra build root folder with a timestamp to make it easy for you to find the results for your latest build. If we open it up, you can see the results in detail. This is the build for the end-to-end test, for the SAP create test, where we got the false verification result. So everything is here as well. So what if I don't want to use a test mandate with name build and something? I want to make it more specific. Well, that's possible as well. We simply provide another parameter within our test config XML. I provided an example here in the project called TOSCA CI test mandate name distributed. Let's go to the configuration. What we are doing here is we again hand over a test config XML. In this case, I named it test mandate name config XML. Let's switch to this one. And here we specified the parameter test mandate name. So if we use this one, we get a test mandate with a specific name plus additionally a timestamp at the end. That makes sense from our point of view, because if you execute it several times, you need to distinguish between the different executions. All right, that's basically it. We could go over to the questions session, Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Thomas. And we do have questions starting to roll in, so we will get right to it. And to those of you who are listening, please feel free to send those questions in. We still have a good amount of time to get to as many of them as possible. So the first question is, how does TOSCA CI handle concurrent access of several clients?
Thank you, Chelsea. Well, you're right. If you're using Jenkins, for example, to distribute your execution on several clients, it may occur that several clients try to check out the build root folder at the same time. That may be a problem. We tried to solve this, especially with 9.10, which is the upcoming release, with a new parameter called max wait for checkout in milliseconds. And this provides you the possibility to try to check out. If it doesn't work, then try again and try again and try again, and define a specific timeout for that.
Thank you. So another question is that the actual execution of the test is taking place on a remote machine. Does that remote machine need to be in any particular state to be usable?
Thank you. Particular state. As mentioned, your remote machine has to have the execution service running, which is an executable. What's more, this execution service holds a web service which requires one specific port, and you need your existing TOSCA environment. So you need a TOSCA installation, and you need a workspace. So a specific workspace to work with.
Wonderful. Okay, well, moving on to the next question. So does continuous integration testing, does that only apply to non-user interfaces like web services, databases, or API testing?
Well, that's an interesting question. Actually, I didn't expect it, but I can give you a quick outlook probably. Of course, it can be used for execution of UI tests as well. We've got a lot of customers that are doing that, facing, of course, the constraint of having the need of an open UI session, which means you cannot lock your screen of your execution machine. I think we all know this constraint, we all know the problem, and we are trying to attack this problem now with 9.2. So we are working on a possibility to execute UI tests even on a locked screen, because we have heard from a lot of customers, well, we've got our execution machines, we've got several internal policies, we cannot keep them open. So we are attacking this problem, and we will come up with a solution for 9.2 for that.
Thank you. That actually answered several questions in one, so that was brilliant. So moving on to the next question. Remote execution, I'm sorry, let's do another one. Is there another way to configure the endpoint address rather than just changing it within the config file?
Yes, there is. One point is you can add it in the config as mentioned within the TOSCA CI client config. If that is not suitable for you, just pass it over as a param in your command here. So the param is called -e, which means endpoint, and there you put in the endpoint where you want it to distribute.
Fantastic. So just a reminder for other questions rolling in, I am going to ask a question which sounds a bit similar to the locked machine one, but just in case it has a difference that I don't understand, I'm going to ask it anyways, and Thomas can let me know. So that question is, remote execution uses a web service for communication. Is this web service secured?
Thank you. By default, we do not secure the communication of this web service, but of course there is a possibility to do that. To do that, we provide the possibility to define an authentication user and password for your web service, which is encrypted in SHA 256. So that's possible, definitely.
Wonderful. Thank you again. And I'm going to give just another moment for the rest of the questions to roll in. Otherwise, we will be wrapping things up, and we just want to say thank you very much for your time being here with us today, and thank you, Thomas, for taking the time to put together this demo. So let's see if anything else is coming in. Okay, and I don't have anything at the moment, so if you are still in the process of typing and you are afraid you'll miss your chance, don't worry. We will still get the questions, and we'll make sure that somebody reaches out to you personally to answer any further questions you have on TOSCA CI or continuous integration, continuous testing, etc. So once again, thank you very much. Thank you, Thomas, for your time, and we hope that you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Chelsea. Bye.